All right, thanks for joining me on my live virtual tour of Australia. Here with me on the My History Verified channel. Australia, an island and continent, was invaded and colonized as well as any other country beginning in the year 1788. However, the Dutch began colonizing in 1475, ending in 1532. Let's begin our tour of Australia. Now, did you know that the colonial period of Australia is 1788 through 1901? After being colonized and the attempts at war was able to overtake the Australian Aborigines, they formed a commonwealth, giving them rights or rules and policies to their own land. Two of the countries, again, that attempted and succeeded at colonization originally was the Dutch and then Britain. Today, currently, Britain has a huge influence over the now colonized and assimilated via forced assimilation of the original Aborigines people. Now, the Australian land and its history dates back to 50,000, actually between 50,000 and 65,000 years. It also, they are descendants of Noah, but I actually cannot pinpoint which descendant of Noah that the Australian family or the Australian people are related or descended from, meaning who's their forefathers leading to Noah. I don't see any indication there, But what ties them so beautifully to biblical times is that the stories that the Aborigines tell today are stories of the ancient biblical times. Now, I will go over timelines, for instance, the prehistory before European exploration, topics of actually societal topics like abortion, agriculture, um, civil rights, theater, arts, what groups currently inhabited the Australian lands, the connection between New Zealand and Australia, the regions or the state and territories and capitals within Australia, and the indigenous lives of the Australians. So before I go virtual, well, let's go ahead and take you to a map. This is a map of the continents of the world as it is in 2023. You see North America. This is where I am at in North America. You see Central and South America, uh, south of North America to the east of North America is Africa. You see Europe, Asia, and there you see where my arrow is, not the red marking there, but the arrows that talking about the land that is east of Africa, southeast of it, um, on the east side of the Indian Ocean, you will see Australia. Australia is not that far from Africa, and it's not that far from any Asiatic islands or countries or people. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom into the continent of Africa, actually, the continent of Australia. Nearby is Malaysia, Indonesia, New Guinea, Guam, Philippines, and New Zealand is southeast of Australia. Zoom in a little bit closer. I love going virtual. All right, zoom in a little further. You'll see that the continent of Australia is broken up into regions and territories. You have West Australia, North Australia is Northern Territory, south of there is South Australia. You have North South Wales and Queensland. And that kind of gives you an idea of who occupied the continent of Australia before and during colonization, actually to this day. So you can tell by Queensland. You can tell by Wales and a lot of other indications that British has a great influence after colonization. All right, we hear a lot about Tasmania, which is land where the Aborigines more than likely traveled between the two islands. New Zealand is also land of Australians, Aboriginal Aborigines Australians and not the colonizers or the descendants' children. We're talking about Aborigines born over 4,000 years and their seed continued on that land. Okay, is that the Tasman Sea is in between there and the Bass Strait is here. So it's below or south of Melbourne between Tasmania. You'll see the Bass Strait. We'll talk about that as well. As you can see that Australia is a lot of Greenland. An island is any piece of land that is surrounded by water on all four corners of its landmass. So it's not like Florida that has three corners of that Florida land surrounded by water. It has, in order to be an island, you have to have all the entire landmass encircled or surrounded by water. Now, give me 1 second. Why is it that when the colonizers and settlers go to take over land, they have a habit of saying that they founded the land or rediscovered or discovered land that's already inhabited? Now, if you have to wage war on those persons that are living there, then it's not your land. And some people today who are indoctrinated and in their minds they believe, what can we do about something that happened in the past? Today, the Australian people, like the quote unquote African Americans of North America, are still suffering in some kind of way, even though there are school systems and education, employment, a few millionaires, a few successful people, a percentage of successful people, able to buy land. Not everybody is able to buy land, excuse me, or land that is currently available. Is so much land that no one should be without land. Absolutely no one should be without land. There are enough trees for everyone to be able to build a house. Now, if someone wants to create nails and make nails to sell or the products to sell, but no one should be going to someone else's land, taking over that land, and then sell you the trees on that land to build a house and then make those trees so high in price and cost that you cannot even afford to build what you want to build. It's just too much land for homelessness or people to be in dilapidated environments. The Australian people, many of them are still in, because of forced assimilation and not living in the habitats that they're used to the way that they want to. Forced assimilation causes poverty. It causes, excuse me, substance abuse. It causes um, violence and on so many levels. All right. And depression is a huge, huge issue in Australia, just like any other place that has been taken over and deprived of the resources that they're used to having to cohabitate or to habitate on their own land. All right, so let's go a little further. Now, I showed you I think it was the Bass Strait. Many of the original Aborigine people arrived from New Guinea, in the Cape York Peninsula, which is, I believe, above the Australian land there. There was an explorer. The original explorer was, of course, a European. In 1606, he was Dutch. His name is William Janzoons. And I'll show you a picture of him in 1 second. All right, now this is who this is who they are stating that William Jansoon is. This is who he is supposedly, the colonizer, the original explorer to Australia to attempt to colonize it. He originally came on the Dutch ship called Dunfkin, and he was the captain of the ship. So he originally landed in actually Amsterdam and attempted to colonize it. All right, so the second person to visit Australia, the northern coast of Australia, in 1720 was the Lieutenant James Cook. He actually navigated east of Australia, and he claimed that land for Great Britain. Then he went to London, came back, and that will actually include Melbourne, Sydney, Wales, and Queensland. And you can tell by the names of those that territory. The first fleet of British ships arrived on that east coast in 1788. They set up a colony, and it was the first colony again to Australia. So you already know what's going to happen afterwards. And the verbiage used, as usual, is the Aborigines or the Indigenous resisted. Of course, they resisted. If you come in and begin to try to tell them how to that you're coming to take, first you come and you bear gifts, and there's a certain phrase with beware of someone that bears gifts. So you don't know them, they approach us with gifts, or it could be somebody that you know, and you know that you've been into it with them, and you're not expecting that gift. It's a be you know, it's an awareness to it. Be aware of anyone that bears gifts. So they came with those gifts, and remember, a lot of them wasn't, they were living in the Greenland, in their communities, living in their culture, however their heritage, um, is lived. Imagine the wars. There are over 100 years of wars, and of course, Australia has its warriors as well. British sent more people to help in the wars. And I haven't mentioned the wars yet. I'm going to name them. And the first set of explorers attempted to kill off some of the Aborigines. Now, if you can remember, there is a lot of black and white footage that they used to share with us about these explorations, and we would see them go in with the indigenous in their grass skirts, or not in full clothing, coats and shirts and pants, and they were living in their natural habitat. Remember these black and white movies. Now think about them. They all make sense today. While they were taping, they didn't show us the parts where they were waging war against them. They didn't show us the mistreatment. Some of those videos have a tendency of leaking out, where they will probably give someone a shot and tell them that they need to take this shot for malaria or any other reasons, that they were approaching a group of people they didn't know about diseases. If a person is already living in those conditions, they are immune to the environment. They are immune to the diseases. What is about to happen is the conflict of war, when they attempted to knock out many of the Aboriginal people by claiming that they had diseases, and they were fighting those diseases with injections or immunizations. This is per This is not allegedly. This is per documentaries that I have seen in the past. All right, so there was gold on the land. There was good agriculture. Let's see what those agricultures were. They were, of course, rich soil. They have a grand dairy, which means they have cows for milk and beef production. There's plenty of wheat because of the rainfall and the land mass and the irrigation systems of New Guinea, Tasmania, and Australia. So there's plenty of wheat, sheep. They use the hair of the sheep, which is the wool. They have lamb and mutton, and again, excellent beef cattle. What else do they have? Fruits and nuts. Of course, I forgot all about the nuts. You have the cola nuts, macadamia, I believe is grown there. Vegetables, barley, poultry, and sugarcane. Now let's see what kind of vegetables that they have. I don't see that. Before going into the wars, the indigenous Australians were hunter gatherers. They also had their own spiritual and artistic beliefs and traditions. That is pre-British settlement. I believe that they still practice them today, but You have to look at the commentaries. There, due to via the forced assimilation and indoctrination, it is against the law for them to practice anything that they practice pre-colonial. And there are people that go out to make sure that they do not do anything that they are have been culturally innate to, or innate by birth. The archaeological findings of Australia are the glaciers and the lakes that surround the Australia land masses. Now, remember that includes um, Tasmania, New Guinea, New Zealand, and Australia. And there are several land. Now, I'm going to show this picture of a Kolala man wearing a headdress worn in a fire ceremony in the near the Forest River of Western Australia. Um, I see culture, I see heritage. I don't know what anybody else sees. Usually, we're dealing with a lot of people that see other people's culture as negativity, or it's a sin to be black or brown, not black but brown, excuse me, or someone with short hair, or someone in their natural habitat. It actually is, the sin is on the evil people that believe that someone else's culture or the way of living is negative or bad to look at. This is a Lorajita man demonstrating methods of attack with a boomerang, and of course, Australia is known for boomerangs and kangaroos, koalas, and nuts. So if I leave out something, of course, I'll find it along the way. So they paint their face and their bodies when they are going to war. The Australian people had a lot of wars. They were involved in a lot of wars for their livelihood, their culture, their their land, their families, because when they went in, they attempted to wipe them out, not having any mercy on them. And when you think about it, the cartoon of the Tasmanian devil, this is the purpose of them coming up with that cartoon. Everything is put in our face. This is the purpose of them coming up with the cartoon, making us see the Tasmanian devil character as evil. He didn't talk. If you notice, that Tasmanian devil didn't talk. The character of it did not talk, but they only showed him in a whirlwind and then causing havoc. That is how they saw the Australian Indigenous when they went to invade their land, colonize their land, kill off their, or unalive their family members and their tribes. So of course, if someone comes to your house to knock on your door and then smile and then try to walk in your door while you're asking them why are they here, and they keep coming in anyway, and then they pull out a weapon, or they say, you know what, I'm about to take your house and everything else, what would you do? Start seeing people as an aggressor when they say something back or they defend themselves. A lot of people, they actually, you see them demonstrating cognitive dissonance when it comes to making the right decision about what they see and what they hear. It's just common sense. You use critical thinking skills. You use facts, and you actually cannot say it's not happening to me. You can, after a while, when you try to help someone and they're not listening, or you tell them, hey, if you're doing this, this is not going to work, or the colonizer don't like you, so this is why they're going to put drugs out, and this is why they're coming they're trying to weaken your existence. You don't go for what they're utilizing to weaken your experience. You try to listen to the information and develop a plan, like what is needed today to survive. So he's ready for war. This is New Holland, a piece of land in, looks like this is originally Australia. One of the many colonizers, Captain James Cook. Of course, he's a mariner, one of many colonizers to Australia. Here you'll see, if you look at the depiction of these two indigenous persons, you'll see that their hair, skin color, how they look, and as they're documenting this information and doing the paintings and drawings, if they are original to that time, they have no idea in 2023 that anybody would be looking at this other than the you know in the audience, the original audience that it was intended for at the time of them creating the documents or drawing the pictures. This is how they look. Two of the natives of New Holland advancing to combat. These are some of the original maps of them drawing out how New South Wales would be divided. They're trying to say that it is new discovered lands. It can't be new lands and discovered lands if there are already inhabitants on it. So when they drew the maps were drawn to report back to those who were investing in their voyages. So it could be the king or the queen or the entire royal kingdom, the bankers of that land, whoever was able to, help supply the boats and the money, the investment of the land. They saw new adventures for new land. And a lot of people were convicts. If you read into the history of Australia, many of the people that went to Australia were convicts of other countries. They were inmates of other countries, especially the UK, Poland, and a couple of other countries. They sent their low people, low in economic status, low in social status, low in ethnicity status, because even the Europeans have a status legend. Okay, they sent their convicts to Australia as they did in the United States of America. I actually have Australian ancestors in my tree. I'll be sharing that with you at another time, but I will get to that at some point. Now, this is a picture of Lieutenant Captain Cook in 1770 going to the island of Australia. bringing over other people. Now, if you look in the foreground there, you will see indigenous persons or people with arrows in their hand. This is their arrival in 1770. This is the ship crew on one of their boats coming over, and they were worried about the ice and the frigid coldness, the waters upon arrival. I don't know what African slaves they brought over in that same water and was able to make it over without any clothes on their bodies like they show us in those pictures with the bodies lined up one by one on the floor of the ships and bunkers, unable to move or rotate, organs on the insides just lying down and staying in one position, or however I don't understand how any Africans were able to in that picture that they tried to tell us to look at, for us to keep in our minds that this is how the Africans came over. So this picture right here is telling you that it was a very difficult voyage coming over with only a few people on the boats. This is Francis Wheatley, who was a famous Arthur. She actually painted this picture. It is another Captain Arthur Phillip in 1786. In 1788, this is when they founded the settlement of Port Jackson at Botany Bay. And as you can see, you will see the indigenous are within this picture as well. Another captain that is probably more than likely an admiral in the Australian Wars. This is a picture of him in 1814. The Sydney Cove. We'll learn more about the Sydney Cove within the video today. Here's another picture with the boats already docked and the houses being developed and the settlements around it. If you look to the left bottom of the picture, you will see original indigenous, what appears to be original indigenous inhabitants of the Australian lands. This is in South Wales. This is a survey of Australia, the southeastern portion of it, between the years of 1827 and 1850, showing how the land will be broken up. As you can see, they have attempted to name the areas of the lands. Here's another picture of an 1839 settlement of it. You see the buildings, the boats on the land waiting. They're not in the waters. And you see the houses in the back. This is a picture of the foundation of Perth, which is a territory of Australia. The British military is here. You see a lady, I'm going to remove that, a female with a hatchet, which means that she's doing work on the land as well. 1839, Adelaide, North Tis. Not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. 1839, the settlements are getting larger and larger. You see that there are paths for the horses, paths through the villages. This is a painting of the Moreton-based settlement in New South Wales in 1835. It states that Queensland did not become a colony separate from New South Wales until 1859. That is another 24 years. So together, Queensland and New South Wales was one land. This picture states Black Eyed Sue and Sweet Pole of Plymouth taking leave of their lovers who are going to Botany Bay Lounge. Bay London. So they're going to one part of Australia and voyaging or exploring a different part of it. Hobart Town chain gang. What is a chain gang? Anyone who is a convict or an inmate for whatever reason or whatever crime, they were placed in jail, and the chain gangs were used for agriculture, meaning building roads, building buildings, building irrigation systems and railroads, actually not helping, but being forced to do the hard, strenuous, dirty work of building towns and nations, villages, the whole transportation systems of other towns. Now, remember, the chain gang is coming from London, the convicts of London, the inmates of London, and there were women convicts as well, women inmates, children inmates coming from Poland and other countries. So this picture depicts the chain gang. This is a 19th century English humanitarian, Carolyn Chisholm. Elizabeth MacArthur. Convict uprising at Castle Hill in 1804. Now, look at the picture very carefully. You'll see the military lieutenants and captains in the middle. To the left of the painting, you will see the British Army. To the right, RIGHT, the right, you will see the convict uprising with more people in their side for battle than the military. And I can guarantee you this almost happened everywhere. The Aborigines in America with the Indians and the tribes joining together. But we have to remember that they also played the tribes against each other. They will send someone in, talk to them, give them some money, trade with them, befriend them with religion or, with talk, take their daughters, marry their daughters. They would do all of that to get them, and it's trickery, to trick them into sympathizing with them. So as you can see, they are outnumbered. So those wars happen. That means they fought to resist being overtaken, mistreated by those that were colonizing or settling on someone else's land. This ship in 1802, it doesn't say where it's coming from, is loaded with men and supplies. Now this is 1802. I'm going to go back one. 1804. So by 1802, they brought over more people. 2 years later, there was an uprising. Matthew Flinders, he was only 27 at the time. He was a member of the Naval Chronicle in 1814. Another picture, the arrival of Burke, Wills, and King at the deserted camp at Cooper's Creek, April 21st, 1861. Now, I have not read about the Cooper's Creek, so I know nothing about it. But this would be an interesting read, because it's stating that you can see the disparity within the picture. You also see unaliving, or what appears to be, or sickly. The animals look sickly. Doesn't look like they have any food, hope. So what happened that this particular part of land, Cooper's Creek, is deserted? What happened? Where is it located in Australia? So it's something to try to look at a little bit further. Now this is a very clear and interesting picture. It's a scene in South Australia. The European was born in Berlin, but he's in Australia. Look at the pictures of the Aborigines. Look at how they look. Look at the hair. You have a lot of people today that will tell the quote unquote African Americans of North America that they look nothing like the Australians, or you can't be them. You're not them. Look at their hair. Well, the depictions of the Aborigines that's untouched by the Europeans, hair is very much like the Indians of the North and Southeast Coast Americas, in which brown people come in different shades. We have the ability to be born and birthed in all shades, not one shade, not the color black. God didn't even create black. There is no black or white, even in a rainbow. He only invented three colors, and with those three colors, you are able to mix and get other colors. But as you can see, this is how the Aborigines look. They're still in their traditional clothing. They're actually commingling as in communicating, interacting with the European. There are not too many Europeans. You only see three, a woman, male, and two children. But you see more Aborigines. Now, this is a depiction of one of the many wars, the Waterloo Creek Massacre, um, by the New South Wales Military Mounted Police, meaning mounted with the use of horses. Don't know if the horses were brought over to Australia or if they are original inhabitants of Australia. We know that the horses originally, for certain, were in North America. All right, look at this picture as well. You will see the original Indigenous Aborigines fighting. They're fighting with spears, but there's an advantage, and that advantage is the European has horses. He has gunnery or weapons, armory, well, not armor, but weaponry, and that weaponry is a gun. And then they also have swords. All right. So that would be a an advantage, and more than likely the massacre that they're talking about. All right, here, Aborigines, Governor Arthur's proclamation to the Aborigines. This is 1828 through 30. This is a real painting painted on pine board, but I can't tell what's going on. So we're going to start at the top. At the top, you'll see the more than one race, as in skin color. More than one race at the top. The children are hand in hand. The two adult women side by side in clothing. This may be an hierarchy to what they want to indoctrination or assimilation. This is what it looks like. And you see two different ethnicity men side by side as well. They both equally have a dog. They're both dressed alike. So in the creator's eyes, or what the government wanted for that land, was everybody to be the same. Not, I don't know if they wanted the wealth to be the same, but in the picture, this depiction, you see the hierarchy to assimilation and um, to assimilation. Now, let's go to the first floor, the ground level. It is a tree. It's funny how they used a tree, which indicates growth. That's why I know that this is a pyramid. It is an hierarchy. All right, so you see a what appears to be a European with a gun, and you can see that the impact of the gun with the guy, the Aborigine, falling to the ground, and you see another one already on the ground. Ironically, you see the colonizers not disclaimer, but warning, trigger warning, uh, with the rope and the lifting up of a person. But that person on that first floor, on that first ground level, is not a brown skinned Aborigine. But there, so that means that that particular person could have been very well, which would probably be a convict or an inmate siding with the Aborigines. We go to the second level. We see where there's an advantage of the Aborigines with the spear. He makes contact with the European. He does, able to strike him more than one time with an arrow. But you see the depiction of the Europeans on the second level with a string from a tree and a brown skinned body lifted up on that tree. All right, we go to the third level. We see what appears to be adults and a child. You don't really see, I see one male, what appears to be one male. Could be a chief with the feathers in his head greeting the admiral or whoever's in charge of that military tier. You see that they are greeting each other, but you don't see any violence. Then on that top tier is where you see what appears to be proclamation, or what they're trying to quote unquote sell to the Aborigines. Hey, if you stop the war, guess what? You'll be just like us. But that didn't happen. So I really, really like this picture. This is a nice painting, an oil painting of a depiction of an hierarchy of what the government expected to happen when they came to invade and colonize the land. Here is a picture of another war of the police and the Indigenous Australians fighting in combat near the Crean Creek in Queensland. You see the Aborigines fighting back. They don't have the same manpower with the guns and the horses, but they're fighting. By 1870, as usual, you see where the indoctrination has taken place. When they began to join armies to fight for them and not against them. This is a sad picture. After all of that fighting, you see a kind of a humbleness that has taken place. Join us. If you can't beat us, join us. All right. We haven't even gotten into the wars. There's over nearly almost 100 years of wars. So they fought. All right. This is a portrait of Bongaree, a native of New South Wales, with Fort Macquarie, Sydney Harbor in the background. What year? It's not saying what year. Looking at the clothes, they were able to get him to assimilate. It appears he also may have some rank with the hat. Look at his skin color and his hair. This is what an original Aborigine looked like. There is no long straight hair that people want to give people to separate Black people from any type of, I guess it would say, pride, or make them think that because a hair is short, that means you're a nobody, or you're not, there's nothing to you because you have no hair. That's freaking ludicrous. All the native or Aborigines in the North America, not all of them, but they look like this. This is how their hair was. When you start mixing and intermingling, then that's when the hair grade changes. So this is how the Aborigines looked. All right, and more pictures. This is a real framed picture. This is not a painting. This is how the Aborigines looked back then. Forced assimilation, indoctrination, Aboriginal farmers at Parker's Protectorate at Mount Franklin, the Aboriginals in Franklin Ford, Victoria. No date. Look at the hair. Look at the clothes. And the posing of the pictures. This is nowhere near 1700s. All right. 1843, the depiction of the opening of the partially elected Parliament in 1843, Sydney, Australia. As you can see, they begin to build the columns, the Roman-looking columns. The architecture of these buildings and who built them. All right. So the government is beginning to form in 1843. You have a parliament. This is Mr. E.H. Hargreaves, the gold discoverer of Australia, February 12th, 1851, returning the salute of the gold miners. He's in, well, all right, I don't know much about E.H. Hargreaves. Probably we'll find out on throughout it. All right, here is another picture of a 1954 battle. It is called the Eureka Stockade Riot of 1854 in Ballarat. Now, if you look closely at this picture, you will see, of course, a battle taking place. You see the British Army in its uniforms on one side, and you see people on the right side that are not dressed in military uniforms. You will see that there are more men down um, on the non-military side, meaning the non-British military side, than there are on the military side. But in wars or battles, someone is going to get hit or affected. So more than, and you also do not see any Aborigines in this battle at all. Not in this picture, you don't. So it appears that in Australia, during the time of colonization, there were battles with the Aborigines indigenous to Australia and those convicts and inmates that came over to work the lands. 1880, it appears that they began to usher in elections. There's organizations to it, A to the letters of first or last name, A to C, vote at this box here. You see conversation. You see people dressed in their best to go to the polling places to vote. Another picture of, it looks like settlers to the land, but there's no depiction of what it is all about. 1890, as the settlements grow, here in Sydney, they have a labor crisis on the street of George Street. There's a riot. And what is it about? More than likely, underpayment, overwork, grueling conditions, or no pay at all. And many other convicts, excuse me, had the ability to pay off um, their inmate status by working. You work to pay the status off, or you work to pay for your criminal debt, or you work to pay to buy your freedom. Right? Here is another picture of not indigenous people, but it appears to be European people gathering wool from the lambs. Australian poet Banjo Patterson. Patterson is a name that is coming up in the Americas um, regarding the Cactocton fire furnace. It is ironic that this person who is a Aboriginal, I don't know if he's Aboriginal or not, but the Pattersons are from many of the islands, including Jamaica and Australia. And the particular branch that I told you have Australia in it, probably like the fourth or the fifth great grandparent. There's a lot of things going on with the Pattersons, meaning that there are a lot of archaeological studies on burial remains found and that name Patterson, and you can say it's common if you like, but I know what my research is in telling, meaning from Australia back to South Carolina or the Maryland, North Carolina, Virginia, dealing with the Patterson, the surname Patterson, that particular uh, maternal side, the Australian ancestor. This is ironic that I found this, but just wanted to share that with you. Now, this is a picture. It actually is an engravement of Sir Henry Parkes. This name is also connected with the Patterson name. This is ironic that I'm finding this all out with you, but I'm going to tie it in soon. All right, so it says that Henry Parkes is moving the first resolution at the Federation Conference in Melbourne. Politics is in full effect. They have a voting system. You see that they are in full, if you look at the picture, their wardrobe is changing. There's columns, royal palaces being built, or royal buildings with extensive architecture is being built within these pictures. Two more Englishmen. Now, 1901, this is the opening of the Parliament of Australia in Melbourne, Australia. So by 1901, they have a full-fledged government going on. So let's see. If we go back from the time that Britain began its attempts at the takeover, 1788, I'm going to subtract that by 1901. 113 years later, they have a full-fledged government. Over 100 years of fighting and resistance by the Aborigines, they literally almost wiped the Aboriginals out just to have that land. Look at the building on the inside, how grand it is. Again, more architecture is showing the changes over time of the wealth, the number of people to the island, right? Anti-immigration cartoon with Victoria urging the Australian Federation to rid itself of the Chinese pest. The Orientals were themselves going to every island, wanting in on everything. They went to Jamaica. They were in Mexico. They went to Barbados. They went to the Americas. And now you're finding out they went to Australia as well, wanting in. They drew up an anti-immigration stance and put into laws to keep them out. The reason why, I'm going to go over that. I want you to think about the reason why they would do that to the Chinese. Hint, Mongolian blood. Why would they let anyone with Mongolian blood, who shares blood with the Asiatics, who shares blood with the Oceania, who shares DNA haplogroups with the Indigenous all over the world? So, of course, they were going to reject them on that level, even though they are a power or a force to be reckoned with. All right, 1909, 8-hour procession. Now you're seeing things come along. Over 100 years of fighting for that country. Look at the buildings. Look at the population. Look at the number of people in this picture. The population has grown. The selfishness of taking out someone's entire people, that you couldn't even just say, here's some land. You want all of the land. And then force them to either, we'll take you out unless you do as we say and attend our schools and wear our clothes, and you stop all your spiritual practices and your heritage, your culture. Stop. You're singing, you're dancing. We don't want to hear none of that. Imagine that. And you go to every island and you do that to the people. And then you convince them that they are the minority. All right, next picture. This is a military battalion, the 9th and the 10th at Mena Camp. They are looking at the pyramids. Where are these pyramids at? The soldier in the foreground is playing with the kangaroo. You see the kangaroo, which is not privy to every continent and country, mainly in Australia. Where is this at? Let's see. Pyramids. Many Australian units brought kangaroos and other Australian animals with them to Egypt. So this is Egypt. And some were given to the Cairo Zoological Gardens when the units went to Gallipoli. I really can't tell where these. All right, watch this. Count Mena. I'm going to go ahead and find out where Count Mena is. And that will tell us where the Count Mena is in Gaza. So that means that these pyramids are in Gaza. How ironic to keep finding all of this information that keeps tying everything together. The people, the lands, the pyramids, the indigenous people of every island and every country. Ironically, this is a picture of Gaza. Wow. All right, so I want this for later. So, guys, I'm not really big on saying do your research because it's becoming a catchphrase. And people that don't do research, they will blurt it out. Go do your research. Then there are people that teach that will say, go do your research. I really get tired of telling people that because basically you're not even talking to kids where you have to tell that to kids. You're talking to grown people that are probably degreed, went to college, high school, 8th grade, 7th grade, but they are coming on your lives or in your comments having cognitive dissonance with knowing how to research and how to find stuff. So when I direct you, I'm going to say take your studying further by looking up the Mena camp and reading more about this particular picture. All right, here's more. 1918, August 8th, 1918. This is a picture of war, and it is the Battle of Amiens. To the right here, you will see a tank, which means they have more military weaponry. They are out of the red uniforms. They're in more camouflage of green, khaki. All right. 1918, John Monash. Looks like he is in the military as well. Prime Minister Billy Hughes smiling during celebrations on his return from the Paris Peace Conference in Sydney, July 1919. 1919. This picture, Australian soldiers carried the little dagger. Australian Prime Minister Billy Hughes along George Street, Sydney, in triumph after the Prime Minister returned from the Paris Peace Conference. Wonder why this picture isn't in color. I don't know why I be trying to talk and then the words don't come out right. But anyway, well, look at this. You see the dress codes have changed, the type of hats being worn. All of the people, you see buildings, totally different from the original settlements. All right, let's see what's next. 1930, City Hall in Brisbane. You see that there are taxis parked on Albert Street, Albert Square in front of the Brisbane City Hall in Queensland. Now look at the cars. It's 1930. By 1990, they were still on horses. If we remember one of those scenes where they were no longer in the red military, um, and then I pointed out that tank, you're seeing different modes of transportation. Now, what year was the Ford vehicle created? Let's see. Ford vehicle. Haven't gotten it yet. Ford Motor Company created its first vehicle in what year? His first plant was in Detroit in 1896. His first Ford assembly plant, 1921, in La Boca, Buenos Aires. By 1913, he was pushing out the cars. 1916, military wagon sold to the British. So the timing is right. All right, portrait of Reverend John Flynn, 1929. The religious groups, the missionaries played huge parts in going in after the military and playing on the wounded after the wars with religion. They were basically logistics or pushing logistics or taking in the information and taking that logistics back to whoever sent them. All right, how many people survived? How many women? How many men? How many children? Are they humble or docile to the indoctrination? What are they talking about? name their god, name their culture, what time do they pray, before indoctrination, after indoctrination, what do they wear? Are they resisting their new names? Because during colonization, people were forced to take on new names, drop their old names, drop their old surnames or their tribal names or clan names, and take on European names. And then you begin to see people not attached to their culture, not practicing their culture. And today, once again, I'm going to point this out again about how people approach Black people, quote, strike that, who approach quote unquote African Americans and say, oh, you don't have any culture. I'm not saying that the Australians are African Americans, but this is just for reference. And they'll say, you don't have any culture. Come on, don't be stupid. You already know that the culture was beaten out of people. It was forced out of the Aborigines and the Africans that came in as slaves. They couldn't utilize their own names from their tribes and clans. They couldn't talk the language. They couldn't practice the religion. They couldn't teach their own children. They couldn't identify with their own uh, tribal affiliations. So, what do you expect? The indoctrination is there. It is what it is. It's what it means. Indoctrination is what it means. Assimilation is what it means. Forced assimilation is what it is. Our history is here. Is here to look at it, read it, study it, and to talk about it. No one gets to force feed and tell somebody that they're lying about something and want you to use cognitive. They're demonstrating cognitive dissonance when they don't want you to even read the facts, interpret them, use critical thinking skills, and then make a decision on it. They're basically saying, shut the hell up and don't say nothing. What you're saying is lies. Nothing what you're saying is the truth. Same book you can open. So the pictures are lying. This picture ain't lying. So how could you have a debate about it? If I pull up another picture, that picture is not lying, because when they created all this stuff, they didn't even have you in mind. The naysayers of who the quote unquote African American is. They didn't have you in mind. So stand tall in who you are. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. This is Charles Kingsford Smith in his flying gear. This lets you know that now they are building airplanes. And in order to have an airplane to fly in, or the flying gear to wear, that means the invention has to have taken place and the invention has to be successful. There has to be a school for how to operate the invention. There is practice after that learning. Maintenance of the invention has to continue to take place in order for this person to be able to be in full flying gear to even operate that invention, which is the airplane. All right, this is a portrait of Edith Cowan, 1861 through 1932, first woman elected to an Australian parliament. So if she passed away in 1932, let's see what year she joined the parliament. Now, what's ironic is when America allowed a female in its ranks of government. So let's see. Haven't found it yet. Give me 1 second. She was in office from 1921 through 1924, a total of 2 years. She was born in 1861. So there's 40. She was almost 60 years old, probably 59. Let me do the work. So she was 49 when she joined the parliament. I want to continue with this. Okay, so the prime ministers in 1926 called the Imperial Conference are pictured here. You see the ribbon ceremony of the Sydney Harbor Bridge ribbon ceremony taking place on March 20th, 1932. The governor, Sir Philip Game, is there. Lord Gifford is there. These are people that are part of the royalty family as it was in the now United States. Those were your settlers as well. So I just want you to think about this. They didn't just come when everything got built. They were part of um the persons in the battles, the military ranks. They were part of the ranks. They were part of the intelligence between the military, the people, the military, and the royalty kingdoms or the royalty countries. And they also were the ones that set up shop for the colonizing of the land, the impregnating of the girls and the women, the continuation of the things like the Jim, and at least in America as well, the Jim Crow laws, the hate, and a lot of other things. It was part of the royalty kingdoms. All right. Unemployment marchers in 1931. So we're beginning to get into World War I, when poverty was a huge thing. You see population, so many people, not enough jobs. And then they're beginning to go into war. So war will be taking place soon. Let's see, World War I by 1931. Was between the years of 1914 through 1918. So the wars have already taken place. Remember, when they come back from the wars, there is no food, there is no money. The promises that the government would give the people to help them with the wars was either not enough, excuse me, were either not enough or didn't come through as expected. Then you have people that are coming back from wars that are broken, the marriages or the relationships broken. Um, Family members passed away. Things are not how they left. And then you have depression, poverty. All right, so 1931, we're leading up to it. Um, they begin to bring in sports. By 1930, you have racetrack or horse racing. These are your two prime ministers in 1941, signing something during World War II. Prime Minister of Australia, Sir Robert Menzies. And remember, he came from Britain. So he's not Aborigines, Australian. And then you have Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Sir Winston Churchill. So I think the other picture was 39. Let's see. 31. 10 years later, they are in a full-fledged war, World War II. You can see it on their faces. All right, ships are going out at this point. Aerial starboard cruiser named HMAS Sydney. It has a 4-inch gun amid the ship. Australian troops plowed through the mud at Mound Bay in New Guinea shortly after the unsuccessful Japanese invasion attempt. An Australian Bren light machine gun team from the 2nd and 8th Battalion firing on Japanese positions on Mount Shibarangu near Wewak in June 1945. This is a picture of them in the trenches. All of this is after taking over land and then trying to keep the land that they took over. Australian and Dutch prisoners of war at Tarso in Thailand. The 4 men are suffering from beriberi. Soldiers from the 2nd and 6th Independent Company displayed Japanese flags they captured during the Battle of Kayapit between 19 and 20 of September 1943. This is a poster requesting joining of the Australian military. Now, what we have 1942, February 1942, an explosion of oil storage tanks hit during the first Japanese air raid on Australia's mainland at Darwin. Darwin, think about the name of the psychologist from England and his attempts at eugenics mixed in with psychology. So 1942, you see the bombs here. You see the pictures, actual pictures of us Japan just bombing Australia. This is a propaganda leaflet. It says he's coming south, referring to the threat of Japanese invasion. A Japanese soldier is stepping across the globe towards Australia. Now, this is to make it seem like they're invading Australia. Be very careful of them. And then, actually, if you look, the man in that picture is black. He doesn't even, uh, he's brown skinned. He doesn't even look like the typical Japanese. So why did they use a brown man in this picture? it provokes fear. By 1954, you have Queen Elizabeth inspecting the sheep at Wagga Wagga agricultural show in 1954 in Australia. Imagine having or inheriting land that someone took from someone else, and then you begin to own the land, the people, the culture, the animals, the production of everything. Imagine that, one person or a family of people. We haven't even gotten into the wars. All right, so let's go back to this. Migrants arrivals in Australia. 50,000 Dutch migrants arrive in Australia, which means that Australia have more Dutch people there, with a huge percentage of Great Britain ethnicities. Maria was up early on the day of arrival to scan the Port Melbourne for the first glimpse. 50,000 people going to someone else's country. All right, 1945. This is the Railway Square. Picture of one of Sydney's buildings. This is post-colonial. Now you're seeing industries coming up. 1963, our own U.S. president goes to join, well, actually, he meets with the Australian government in his Oval Office. And actually, this is a picture of President the late John F. Kennedy. You see the military preparing for something. This is a picture of Nixon meeting with someone as well. President Carter meeting with in Australia, the Prime Minister of Australia. Gorbachev meeting with Prime Minister Hawke in 1987 from the Soviet Union. They erect a new parliament building or house building in 1988. In 1992, the president of Indonesia visits the Prime Minister of Australia. Look at the skin tones of the Indonesians. 2006. Now, this states that these are Aboriginal dancers that make their way across the floor of the Olympic Stadium while performing before an audience of 110,000 during the opening ceremonies for the Sydney 2000 Olympic Games. They actually look the same color or the same skin color as the original Aboriginals. 2000 Australian members of international forces. 2006 Labour Party. Special forces soldiers and Afghan police await an extraction in Uruzgan. Afghan National Police and their Australian Special Forces partners have further degraded the insurgents. So they are at war. More than likely the Middle East war. All right. This is the signing of the free trade agreement with the Australian Prime Minister Andrew Robb and the Chinese President Xi and Minister of Commerce Gayo Hutchin. This actually looks like a mound in Australia in this desert. It's called Ayers Rock. It was founded in 1992. Now, there has been known to be mounds and some pyramids in Australia. All right, so I'm going to leave out of there. Let's go over some of the explorations by the Europeans. In 1606, William Janzoon was the original, British explorer. In 1606, Luis Vaz de Torres was also a European explorer to the Australia. Dirk Hartog, he joined in 1616. Frederick de Houtman, he joined the exploration of Australia in 1619. By 1644, Abel Tasman. 1696, William de Blooming. 1699, William Dampier. 1770, James Cook. 1797 through 99, George Bass. And 1801 through 1803, Matthew Flinders. These are your colonizers or explorers of the Australian land um, for the actual takeover of the land, the invasion of it. And of course, the land was colonized. All right, let's go over some of the regions of Australia. Some of the regions are of course, New Zealand. Some of the land again, New South Wales, Northern Territory, Queensland, South Australia, Tasmania, Victoria, Western Australia. You have Canberra, Sydney, Darwin, Brisbane, Adelaide, Hobart, Melbourne, and Perth. Perth came up. Let's look at Perth. Let me see if I can expand Perth. Find out where it's at. Now think about the environment of all this green land. A lot of it is jungle. So that's why they have so many cities on the outskirts, because if you have an enemy and this is their land and it's all jungle, would you really want to fight them and go in the center of all of this to fight? So I don't think they really went into all of these trenches. Now here go open land all here. It can't be too inhabitable that the colonizer would have wanted to develop it. So just step outside the box on how they're doing things and why they're doing it. If you look, the cities are all around. Let's zoom it in. Now I like to go virtual, meaning I like hitting that satellite. Go in some more. Now I remember when Google first came out. I've had a computer that long, and I used to go in and out of Africa. Um, what was scary was, even with this map, Google map, and it's not as advanced as it is now, because when it would go out, and some parts the Google, I guess it would be the satellite hadn't reached, and then you'll be stuck over waters. So I experienced that a lot in the late 80s and the 90s when I did the Google satellite. But I actually loved it because I will tune into Africa. I mean, I actually really love this. All right, so here we go. I want to go in deeper. Just going to pick a location. Let's go to Melbourne, which is here. I'll wait for you to catch up with me. I'll zoom it in a whole lot more. It has a embodiment of water. Let's see if I click this map, would it take me there? And then satellite. No. When we think about places, we think that they're so small and not, I mean, that there's not a lot of land to cover. Right here lets you know that all of those houses and buildings and parks are on these spaces. And when we think about it, we think about our little piece of land where we're near, and the mileage that we have to travel to get from point A to point B locally, or even if we go out of state. But when you think about this, look at all of this. Just step outside the box on what you're seeing. Remember, this started with just a settlement, and it actually was someone else's land. But I love going in. I didn't know that this was like this. I did not know Melbourne was like this at all. So it is well developed with streets. Then you look at your TikTokers who live in Australia, and I'm thinking, when I think about this, I'm thinking about them, going to their venues and not thinking that the land mass is like this, and all the streets and the lights, and look at this. All right. So I wanted to go in deeper, but it's not allowing me. Usually you're able to get a bird's eye. So that's allowing me. But at least we're able to see it. Like on my St. Kitts video, we were able to zoom in and see the actual streets. They're not allowing it here with the Australian. Google map. Look at the bodies of water. You can see where the sand drifts are, or the land, although it's water. Oh, I actually thought I was going to be able to go. I guess Google Maps don't really go there, huh? Let's look at Kings Island. Let's see if they'll let us on here. What's going on here? This is a lot of Greenland, so nope. Looking for civilizations. I don't think so. Thank you for joining me. Can't see much of it. How about New Guinea? This is rough, rugged territory. In these terrains, that's why they lost a lot of the war, especially Jamaica and Haiti, because it's impossible to fight your enemy on terrain like this, especially if your body cannot adapt to the environment, the heat, the ruggedness of it. If you're not a real warrior in these type of lands, it's very difficult to do hand, what do you call that, foot battle or foot troops. Same way when they go to Saudi Arabia, or what they call the Middle East, because that's a new term as well. When they go to the Middle East, it's very difficult for them to fight in these areas because the land is rugged. It's, as you see now, Central Africa has greenery, but Northern Africa, that's all desert. So either way it go, it is probably more difficult to fight in the northern parts of Africa, and more than likely in the central or the greenery parts of Africa as well. Same way when you go into Russia, there's dry mountain land. So somebody's going to pick their enemies wisely. You come to Africa, you pick your enemy, you're going to be able to flee really quickly. You have an ally here. Northern part, you might have an ally going back this way. But nevertheless, you definitely will pick your battles. All right, so let me go back into Australia, zoom it up. Now, let me tie in the Australians with the original encounters. And not at this moment, but with scriptures. All right, so it is stated that, again, when Captain Cook came in to explore the land, he came across many of the Australians. And when they would communicate with him, they were still in primitive or innate living status. but they also told stories about scriptures. Now, if you know that they don't have any books and they're in primitive form, then where did they get their stories from? So it is known to be a fact that the Aboriginal or the Aborigines Australians came, they're of Noah, but I actually cannot find out who their forefathers, excuse me, who their forefathers are. Excuse me, give me 1 second. What's ironic is the mentioning of the Tower of Babel in the discussion of the connecting the Australians, the Aboriginal Australians to scriptures. They mention the Tower of Babel, and I'm going to tell you what it says. These were the ancestors of all peoples today. God commanded the descendants of Noah to move out over the earth. They refused and instead congregated together to build a tower, the Tower of Babel, about 4,000 years ago. God became very angry at this, so he confused their language and forced them to move apart. Different languages resulted. One nation and culture was split into many groups. People with similar language would have moved together to various parts of the earth. Soon after this, the world would have been populated by groups which spoke different languages and lived in different places. This would eventually produce different cultures because of the different climatic conditions, the variations of skin color, etc. among people, the isolation and inbreeding of different groups of people with minor variations of skin tone, eye shape, etc. came into being. New nations were being born. In summary, all people of the world today have their ancestry in a man called Noah, and further back to Adam, whether they be the Australian Aborigines, the American, or the American Indians. The different cultures separated by different languages have only arisen since the time of the Tower of Babel. And after having the knowledge that I know of the Tower of Babel is constantly making me connect that of that to the lineages today. The physical differences between the supposed races, in other words, skin color, eye shape, are only minor. In the mythology and legends from cultures around the world, you would expect to find their ancestry in Noah reflected in their stories about a world flood or how many was created. Now, let's apply the biblical perspective on history to the Australian Aborigines. Their ancestor Noah had the knowledge of the true God. He also had shipbuilding technology, farming ability, knew how to work alloys, etc., remnants of the true knowledge of God, of creation, and of Noah can still be seen in their mythology. That means their storytelling. In other words, they have many legends of a worldwide flood, all of which means that somewhere in their history, this knowledge has been forgotten, lost, or deliberately discarded. The culture that Captain Cook discovered was spirituous. They did not have the knowledge of the true God and only had a Stone Age culture, which means it was passed down from Ancient times or Stone Age times and nothing in between, which means that that knowledge came from that era that the Aborigines knew. Also, it is stated that someone somewhere in their history has turned away from the true God, devised their own religion, and successfully persuaded their fellow Aborigines to accept it. They have suffered the consequences of this. Instead of being a culture regenerated by God's standards, they have degenerated from them. Now, before you start shouting racist, take into consideration the fact that the European culture in Australia is a little different. Despite its background of Christianized history, it has turned its back on God and is increasingly an anti God degenerate culture. Many Australians can't see it because they have become immune. White people point to natives who have been headhunters known to cut people up and eat them, while I don't know why this says this. All right. Trigger warning. Such people they label as primitive savages. The white society forgets that it also does the same. Millions of them in various ways. All right, let me finish that. I didn't expect that. What's ironic is about this is how when or after they would colonize a people or colonize their tribes, they would verbally demean them about how they responded, meaning, maybe somebody didn't want to be a part of a colonized area. And so they might not put the effort in. And then to other people that will look like they're lazy or dumb or stupid when they're actually being forced to accept a culture that's not theirs. Mentally, it's like showing you how to do something. You've done it over and over again. And then someone you don't know comes and says, "Oh, you don't do that like that. You do it like this." But it's totally different from what you were doing, how you say it, what you use to make it happen. That mentally actually tears the brain pattern up. So you can't attach it to anything. You can't attach it to any prior learning because they've already told you that you can't utilize that way of learning anymore. You can't utilize the information you know. And then you get penalized for it or you get demeaned for it. Like, for instance, a lot of Black people or quote unquote Black or quote unquote North Americans have broken English. Well, if we're from tribes, no matter if the tribes or the clans or the bloodline or pedigree is indigenous, aborigines, or it is of the quote unquote Africa, wouldn't our language be broken? Wouldn't how we communicate be broken? Wouldn't our accent or enunciation and pronunciation be broken? But to demonize that is an issue for a generalized people. That's why you have to know who you are. That's why you have to be proud of whatever you say, how you look, who you are, and what you know. And then what you don't know, you learn it. You learn more. But yes, a person with a broken language, don't you know innate they have languages already in them. And if we go by what's in scriptures that says that we're able to speak in tongue and in languages we don't know? What do you think that those languages are? What do you think about that? You have to think. We have innate languages, all right? So when you hear someone talking, don't be calling people ghetto or because a person isn't speaking politically correct to you, because that's all it is. Political correctness. You're holding someone to political correctness, and behind the closed door, you're closing it and you're doing what the heck you want to do and talking how the heck you want to talk. You're cussing, saying whatever you want to say, using whatever words you want to use, and then you go back into that person's face again, and then you're forcing them to be politically correct. By whose standards? That's why it's important to know who you are. In 2023, know who you are. Fight between good and bad right now. All right, land rights. Now, this is an important issue. The issue of religion was stripped from the Aborigines. And then what they did was say, look, they're not even close to uh, the original religion of Noah. Well, that's because they know that those tribes were broken up. And I wish I could find, I'm going to research this a little further to find out if the Aborigines are of the tribe of Israel. Let me see. Let me see. I can't tell. I don't want to Google it because I already did that. And I have my encyclopedias, but encyclopedias are now online. I really can't. Usually that's ironic because usually if you type in something, it's going to come up. But if you type in, and you can do that with me, the who are the Aboriginal Australians, the descendant of the Bible, I guess. They keep talking about Noah, but they're not going past that, which means that they know. This is the first time that I've ever researched something and it's not coming up. And it's as if either they didn't care to do the research or they're hiding something. I really can't tell. There's nothing popping up about it. They actually keep talking about Torres Strait, but that is not going back to. All right, here's something that lists the different gods, but remember they 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 know about Noah and the flood, but over time, because they lost their religion, they began to worship other gods. They have a lot of different gods, but it appears to be in elements and animals. and fertility. List of Australian Aboriginal deities. Wow. Okay, it's here, but it's not leading me to uh, Judah, the tribe of Judah. Okay, so all right, no, I can't get to that. Now let's get into the land rights of the Aboriginal. There was over 40,000 years ago, of course, they were already on the land, but they had to, and biblically, they were given rights to the Australian land. Ironically, there was a push that the original Aborigines get land rights. I don't see any treaties that come up regarding the land rights. Now, if you look at a lot of the documentaries, the originals are still being mistreated. Their indoctrination is really, really harsh, where like they have the Australian government logistics that go into their homes, and the homes are actually made like projects, and they in that type of environment, which is you can visibly see that they're out of culture, they're out of environment, and they seem misplaced, but they're trying to live a life of wake up, get out of the bed, go to the kitchen, or go to work, and many of them are without jobs. It's a very difficult life. Some people go ahead and force themselves to go along with the indoctrination. Then there are others that know that it doesn't, it's not, is actually not kosher. Now, if you look online, I'm not seeing a lot of them on online as like I used to, telling their stories, which let me know that that somehow the government has intervened, that they're not online telling any of their stories. Whether they have a Facebook page, TikTok page, Instagram page, I'm seeing that. They also, again, when those the government comes in, they will go into the houses to check to see how many people are in the house, what's in the refrigerator. A typical to project living, or um, how about a a government intervened living. They also get rations. They are it's they're some of the things of society are pushed. You can tell different things with gender are pushed, or um alcohol. It's just certain things that you can see. If you look at the real good commentaries, it was one on, I believe, Prime, where they showed the men dressing as women and taking on that lifestyle. And it's actually appears, even on the outside looking in, it looks foreign. It doesn't look culture, as in kosher, at KOSHER. So if you get a chance, look up some of that. Some of the movies or the documentaries that share the culture of the modern Australian Aborigines. Some people have assimilated well. A lot of them you see still practicing the culture. They put it in their arts, like bracelet making or skateboard making, paintings or dancing. So it's just when people come in and take over someone else's, existence, it makes things real, real hard to accept. All right. So it is stating that the as of 2016. Now, remember, there are so many archaeological studies in between certain periods until 2023 where you will see DNA studies or analysis or burial finds where it's always someone saying, well, this is the oldest DNA here. You have to pay attention to the verbiage. If they're saying the oldest DNA of that land or that country, that landmass, or of a particular ethnicity, um, geologic, geological location, you have to pay attention to all of that. Now, it is stated that the DNA of the Aboriginal Australians are the world's oldest society. The group was the first to split after a single wave of migration out of Africa between 51,000 and 72,000 years ago. So they have the oldest, what they claim to have the oldest DNA. Now, there's a connection, I believe, with them with the Neanderthals. And you have to really read into it to understand what's their relation to the Neanderthals or the Mongolians, which would be the Asians. So I'm going to go ahead and begin reading. For centuries, Aboriginal Australians have said they belong to the oldest sustained civilization on the face of the earth, citing their culture and history of oral storytelling that stretches back tens of thousands of years. Now, one of the most extensive analysis of Indigenous Australian DNA to date suggests that they've been right all along. The ancestors to modern humans first arose in Africa, but the question of where and when they began spreading out from the continent has long plagued scientists and archaeologists alike. While Homo sapiens are far from the first human species to begin exploring other parts of the planet, other older species like the Neanderthals and Denisovans made it out first. The question has long been whether the ancestors of modern non Africans left in waves or all at once. Nailing down the approximate times that one's ancestors left Africa is tricky business. Previous research has shown that humans began splitting into different genetic groups about 200,000 years ago, long before they first began exploring other continents. By analyzing DNA from 787 people from 207 modern cultures spread across the world, a group of scientists identified and tracked ancient genetic mutations that they believe mark when different ethnicities diverged as their ancestors settled across the world. Using this genetic tracing, the researchers suggest that the first Homo sapiens began leaving Africa between 51,000 and 72,000 years ago, and the ancestors of Indigenous Australians were the first group to split off from that migration. While the ancestors of Europe and Asian people diverged about 42,000 years ago, the precursors to today's Indigenous Australians and Papuans diverged 58,000 years ago to head east. This story has been missing for a long time in science, quote unquote. Now we know their relatives are the guys who were the first real human explorers, meaning hunter gatherers. Our ancestors were sitting being kind of scared of the world while they set out on this exceptional journey across Asia and South and across the sea. These humans eventually made their way to an ancient supercontinent, which was eventually split into Australia, New Zealand, and Papua New Guinea by rising tides, while that isolated them genetically from the rest of the world. Their culture was strong and vibrant enough to develop new languages and traditions as they made their way across the continent. The study confirms our beliefs that we have ancient connections to our lands and have been here for far longer than anyone else. While the study appears to seal the deal on the world's oldest society, it raises new questions. The genetic analysis also showed that the ancestors of Indigenous Australians and Papuans may have mated with a previously unknown human species, just like ancient Europeans interbred with Neanderthals. Though scientists are just now getting hints at who these mysterious human beings were, further genetic analysis could shed light on another ancient relative. And that is coming from the Smithsonian. Now, let's go over some of the haplogroups. Some of the haplogroups of the Australians. The Y DNA haplogroups, which is passed along from male to male. And this in particular in populations of Oceania. The Oceania populations, ethnicities are the Pacific Islands and Australia. And it includes East Indonesia. Those are the ethnicities that make up the Oceania chromosomes. All right. The Australian Aborigines, their chromosome would be R, and then R6.8. In the northern part of Australia at the Arnhem Land, let's see where the chromosomes are. All right, the Western Desert people. So that's the western part of the Australia, and it appears that pretty much of over 600,000 square miles or 230 square miles is desert land. The Alor, which are on the islands of Papuan. The Pantar tribes are there as well. The Bali people. Bougainville. They're oceanic as well. Cinderwash. Cook. They're Polynesian. Fiji. They're Melanesia and Polynesian. Flores, Australian, excuse me. All right, French Polynesian. Lesson Lesser Sunda Islands. The Maori. They're indigenous Polynesian people of mainland New Zealand. Melanesians. These are Africans or of African blood or the blood of the original. Micronesia. Oh, didn't mean to. Moluccas. It is an island of the Molucco Islands. New Britain is the largest island in the Bismarck archipelago. New Guinea, Eastern New Guinea or Guinea, Western New Guinea, New Ireland, and then PNG Coast, PNG North Coast, PNG Southern Coast, the PNG Highlands, which is New Guinea, Eastern, and the islands, West Pape, Polynesian, Rapa Nui, Samoa. I actually thought they were in Hawaii. All right, Solomon, Sulawesi, Samba, Tahiti, Timor, East Timor, Tonga. I thought that, okay, so they're Polynesian, but I thought they were Hawaiian. All right, Trobrians. And if you look, you'll see that that is an embodiment of a lot of islands. The Tuvalu and the Vanuatu. All right, these are all Oceania populations of the Y chromosome. That means that a male species passes down the Oceania DNA. All right, so we just went over the chromosomes. Let's get into some pictures of the pre and post Aborigines. Beautiful. I mean, they are beautiful and they are intelligent. But sometimes when I look at them, when they are talking, they are very appear to be agitated and they're very quick tempered. You can see that they do not play any games. So there's a lot of respect when it comes to me when I'm viewing the Australian people in interaction on any of the social media sites. Oh, he's beautiful. Imagine having to give up your land, fight for the land, fight for the land. All right, this is an interesting picture. This is the mindset of of a colonizer. Somebody always has to be in chains. It takes a lot of hate to put chains around a person's neck and to treat them like animals, or to control over them, or to be superior over another man. And that even hurts me when in jail, when somebody wants to be superior over another man instead of letting the man be. Now, if somebody is, capable of hurting somebody just because they're ignorant or have a mentality of murder, I can see that, or rape. But to just be dominant over another man that walks into a tear, I don't understand that. That's taking a man's manhood away from him. So look at this. This is disheartening. It is disheartening that people walk this earth and was this heinous. Makes me sick. All right, let me keep going. All right, let me go into some of the treaties. I only saw one particular treaty, so I don't know if I researched enough. But it actually is a bill that was passed in 2000, originally in 2008, and then 2013, to cover the curriculum and the education of the children of Australia. The bill is from the Parliament of the Commonwealth of Australia. So I'm going to go ahead and share the bill. All right, here it is to the right. It's coming from the Australian Government Federal Register of Legislation, and it reads 2019 through 2020, the Parliament of the Commonwealth of Australia, the Senate, Australia Education Legislation Amendment Prohibiting the Indoctrination of Children, Bill 2020. Now, if they can put and use that word indoctrination, I don't know why it's so taboo to say these words in America. If they can use it in their own documentation, all right? Explanatory memorandum calculated by authority of Senator Hanson. Australian Education Legislation Amendment Prohibiting the Indoctrination of the Children, Bill 2020 outline. The purpose of this bill is to give parents the legal rights to protect their children from indoctrination at school. Parents have the right to move their child from a school or to home school their child, but they do not have the right to challenge the teaching in schools, such as gender fluidity theory and man-made global warming. Notes of clauses. Clause 1, short title. Clause 1 provides for the short title of the Act to be the Australian Education Legislation Amendment Prohibiting the Indoctrination of Children Act 2020. Clause 2, commencement. The clause provides that the bill will commence on the day after the Act receives the royal assent. Clause 3, schedule. Each act specified in the schedule to this act is amended, or repealed as is set out in the applicable items in the schedule. Any other item in a schedule to this act has effect according to its terms. And remember that it said it has to have royalty assent, which means that the continent of Australia is currently owned by British royalty. Clause 3, schedule. Each act specified in the schedule to this act is amended or repealed as is set out in the applicable items in the schedule. Any other item in a schedule to this act has effect according to its terms. Schedule 1, amendments. Item 1, at the end of Section 7 of the Australian Curriculum, Assessment and Reporting Authority Act 2008. This item inserts new subsections 7, 6, and 7 to require the Australian Curriculum Assessment and Reporting Authority ACRA to promote a balanced presentation of opposing views where they exist. Item 2. After Section 22 of the Australian Education Act 2013, this item inserts new Section 22AA. The purpose of this section is to ensure that teachers are prohibited from conducting classes in a way that would result in the indoctrination of children. The section will make federal education funding to a state or territory conditional on the state or territory having laws enforced that prohibit a staff member at a school promoting partisan partisan views or activities to students, and require a staff member at a school when teaching a subject to ensure that there is a balanced presentation of opposing views in relation to that subject. Funding will also be conditional on the inclusion in state or territory laws of provisions for the orders on the application of parents or guardians to enforce compliance with the above requirements, paragraph 22AA 1C. In addition, in order to receive funding for schools, state or territory laws will need to require schools to consult parents or guardians on the extent to which staff are fulfilling their requirements to present a balanced presentation of opposing views. Statement of compatibility with human rights prepared in accordance with Part 3 of the Human Rights Parliamentary Scrutiny Act 2011, Australian Education Legislation Amendment prohibiting the indoctrination of children, Bill 2020. The bill is compatible with the human rights and freedoms recognized or declared in the international instruments listed in Section 3 on the Human Rights Parliamentary Scrutiny Act 2011. Overview of the bill. The purpose of the bill is to give parents the legal right to protect their children from indoctrination at school. Parents have the right to move their child from a school or to homeschool their child, but they do not have the right to challenge teaching in schools such as gender fluidity theory and man-made global warming. Human rights implication. The bill does not engage any of the applicable rights or freedom. Conclusion. This bill is compatible with human rights as it does not raise any human rights issue, signed by their senator. So indoctrination is a huge issue. Do not think that this is not something that they do not know anything about, that they are not aware of, and you should not walk around as if the word indoctrination and assimilation is a word or forbidden word. or a sacred word. It is not sacred. It is a word that is what it is, and it explains what it is, the force of something, right? Now, the population of Australia is currently, let me get to it, 28 million. The population of it is 28,890,773. Now, you have people that are living in New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, South Australia, Western Australia, Tasmania, Northern Territory, Australian Capital Territory, Australia. Now, the makeup of Australia, what are the ethnicities? I don't know why that doesn't have it. The demographics of Australia. All right, there is 67.4% British that live in Australia. There is 8.7 Irish, 3.8% Italian, 3.7% German, 3.6% Chinese, 3.0% Aboriginal Australian. 3% Australians live, Aboriginal live in their own land. That means they basically eliminated them. 1.7% Indians, 1.6% Greek, 1.2% Dutch, 5.3% other. I want you to look at these numbers. Now, how could the original inhabitants of Australia be down to 3.0%? How could that happen? Where are they at? Are they being miscounted? Did you really eliminate them? What happened? This happened from island to island, any and country to country, right? I don't know why my the hourglass just popped up on my screen, but it did. All right, so we're going to get into why did they colonize? Why did they colonize Australia? And when I say they, I'm talking about Great Britain. All right, so go ahead and guess that if you can. Why did they colonize Australia? And better look at the population of the Dutch today, or at the time of that demographic study or statistics, doesn't look like very many Dutch live in Australia. So why did Great Britain colonize Australia? Let's get to it. All right, Captain James Cook, he sailed along 2,000 miles to get to the east coast of Australia in 1770. He landed at Botany Bay. That's why it is named after him and why he was briefly there. He also claimed the Queensland for the British Crown. 18 years later, Botany Bay was made a colony. And then he named the Southern Wales after more exploration. Now, they actually thought that Australia was a perfect colony. Now, let's see what they had to say about it. Now, what made Australia perfect for colonization was that it was an untouched, empty continent. And it wasn't empty, it had people on it. But their words, his story, that it was an untouched, empty continent that the British could occupy without opposition. That's not true. They had opposition. I'm going to continue reading. Although Dutch navigators had discovered parts of Australia long before Cook arrived, their countrymen made no attempt at settling there. So that means that the Dutch came, found it, navigate parts of it, and didn't want to live there. Cook had noticed that there was a native population, so he noticed, not the Dutch. Cook had noticed that there was a native population, and he actually shot at 2 Aboriginals as he landed on shore. There would be violent conflicts between the indigenous population and colonists for many years. Now imagine someone coming to your doorstep, the very house that you are in or apartment that you are in now, and you don't know them, and all of a sudden you see them, you all lock eyes, and they shoot at you and then come into your house. This is what happened to the Aborigines of Australia. Now, as the first settlers soon discovered, this new continent proved to be an unfriendly host. The natives were hunter-gatherers who had made no attempt to cultivate the land or build settled communities. So there was no infrastructure to take over or imitate. The wildlife was impossible to lame or tame or farm. You can't milk a kangaroo. And there were many species of snakes, spiders, and scorpions that were armed with deadly venom. The climate was baking hot away from the coast, and although several fairly large rivers disgorged into the sea close to Botany Bay, others proved to be highly seasonal, drying up completely for many months of the year. There were no obvious natural resources that anyone would want to exploit and send back to England. So, what reason could there possibly be for wanting to colonize Australia? Why? Because it was remote and it had no harshness. The properties were exactly what were needed when the old country wanted to export its most troublesome commodity, namely its criminals and undesirables. And that is why Australia was taken over by the Great Britons. They needed a place to send their criminals and undesirables. America was built by criminals, undesirables, overzealous religion, missionaries, delusional people. Australia was perfectly suited to become a penal colony, meaning that's where they held all of their jailbirds. Penal, as in jail institution, somewhere where you detain people. All right. Somewhere to send British criminals. This function had previously been taken by the American colonies, particularly those of Georgia and the Carolinas. So that means that everybody except we know that the Georgias and the Carolinas, North and South, were manned with criminals. Although Newfoundland was also used for this purpose. With American independence, a new convict settlement was needed, and Botany Bay sounded just about right, although nearby Sydney Cove turned out to be more suitable for building a settlement. So instead of having those that came over to Georgia, USA, or North and South America, USA, they gathered all of their criminals and began to send them to Australia. The Salisbury and Winchester Journal of April 25th, 1785 stated that Michael Denison from Poole, for having broken open a sloop from which he stole several articles, was sentenced to be transported for 7 years. He made the journey aboard the Alexander, which was one of the ships of the First Fleet, and arrived at its destination on January 1788 with its 1,000 or so convicts, soldiers, and officials. Although 28 convicts died on board the Alexander during the passage, and they want you to believe that Africans came over in large numbers and survived and were able to get on the slavery block, auction block, open their mouth and show their clean, beautiful teeth and clean bodies, and they were fine for sale. Michael Denison survived to become one of the first white Australians. Now, who were the convicts of Australia? The convicts were, generally speaking, from the lowest rungs of the English social ladder. They were used to living hard lives and settling disputes with their fists. Although the convicts were often tough people, many of the crimes would strike us today as being mild in the extreme compared to then. Stealing as little as a shilling for a first offense could land someone in Australia. There was a case in my wife's family history of a girl of 15 who was asked to hold a horse for a man who had just ridden up and dismounted next to where she was standing. The horse had been stolen, and when the constable arrived, she was arrested for being in possession of stolen property. The girl later became one of Australia's matriarchs and the ancestor of a great Australian dynasty. This was in the 1900s. The 19th century, many transportees were political prisoners. There were martyrs who were transported in 1834 for organizing themselves into an agricultural trade union that were later reprieved and returned to England. Many of those, after they served their time, stayed in Australia. They began to help with building new colonies. Now, let me throw a question out there for you. Why couldn't the Europeans make Australia like England? Now, we started this off telling you why, and then someone's asking this question again. Why couldn't the Europeans make Australia like England? Answer: the climate, the geography, the wildlife. All are very different and could never lead to another England. However, conditions in parts of New England do have similarities with Great Britain in several respects, and the settlers did tend to try to make their new home as much like their old one as they could. Another question, who was Captain Cook? That The answer is that would be the subject for a different article. Captain Cook was an 18th century Navy captain who made several voyages to the Pacific and discovered many places that had previously been unknown to Europeans. He was unalived by natives on Hawaii in 1779. All right, I'm going to move along from the questions. Now, let's get into the colonial period of 1788 through 1901, and this will be from the Australian War Memorial. British settlement of Australia began as a penal colony, we already know that, and it was governed by a captain of the Royal Navy until the 1850s, excuse me, when local forces began to be recruited. British regular troops garrisoned the colonies with little local assistance. From 1788, Marines guarded English settlements at Sydney Cove and Norfolk Island. They were relieved in 1790 by a unit specifically recruited for colonial service, and in 1810, the 73rd Regiment of Foot became the first line regiments to serve in Australia. From then until 1870, 25 British infantry regiments and several smaller artillery and engineer units were stationed in the colonies. One role of the troops was to guard Australia against external attack, but their main job was to maintain civil order, particularly against the threat of convict uprisings and to suppress the resistance of the Aboriginal population to British settlement. With the end of convict transportation to New South Wales in 1840, the need for military forces diminished and troop strength began to decline, particularly as British troops were required in the first Anglo-Maori wars in New Zealand, and as colonial police forces were formed. So that means in 1840 is when police probably were formed around the world. After the last British regiment left in 1870, the colonies were obliged to assume responsibility for their own defense. Only rarely during their time in Australia did British troops fire upon fellow Europeans. In March 1804, British regulars suppressed a convict rebellion near Castle Hill, and in 1829, soldiers were involved in putting down the Ribbon Gang outbreak near Bathurst in an incident that took place after transportation had ended. That means transporting of convicts to Australia. British troops, along with police, battled insurgent miners at the Eureka Stockade on the Ballarat goldfields on December 4th, 1854. British soldiers based in Australia who did partake in military operations were more likely to have fought across the Tasman in the Anglo-Maori Wars of the 1840s and 1860s, resulting from the continuing expansion of European settlers onto Maori land and the colonial government's determination to crush native independence. The first war took place in 1845 through 46 with insufficient troops in New Zealand to meet the threat. That means in 1840, 1840 through 1860, they were still fighting. Remember, they invaded in 1788. So over 100 years, they were still fighting for their land, for their lives, to exist on their own land. With insufficient troops in New Zealand to meet the threat, the 58th Regiment of Foot, then based in Australia, was displaced in February 1845, soon to be followed by further troops. Fighting died down after 1846 but flared back up again in 1860 before a truce was declared and peace returned. I'm going to show you this map. And this is a picture of New Zealand during the New Zealand Wars. You can see the top of the island going down to Auckland. And down to near the adjacent island of South Island. So the wars of the New Zealand Wars were between, actually for the North Island and the South Island against British. All right, so to tie up some of the wars that were taking place, um, the first one is between 1790 and the 1800s. All right, so the first war was at Sydney Cove, the Sydney Cove War, that involved the Aboriginal Australians, that lasted 10 years. They took the land from the Indigenous clans. Then Pemulwuy's War was also between 1790 through 1802. I'm going to show you who he is. And he is one of Australia's famous resistant fighters. So he wasn't just a fighter, he was a warrior. He was a big jiggle man, or big jiggle man of the Eora Nation. He was born around 1750 in the area of Botany Bay in New South Wales, Australia. He is noted for his resistance to European colonization, which began with the arrival of the first fleet in 1788. He actually lived near Botany Bay, which was known as K-May around that time. He's considered, Pemulwuy is considered to be a clever man, Eora spiritual healer, and cultural keeper. Now, before he had to go to war, he would hunt meat and provide it to the food challenged new colony in exchange for goods. That means that the colonizers didn't know how to hunt. And so he hunted and exchanged the um, meat for other goods. By 1790, he began a 12-year guerrilla war against the colonists until he was assassinated. He grew into manhood and became Pemulwuy, which represents the earth and the crow. And according to indigenous activists, he wasn't very impressed with the mix of cultures, so he was against mixing. Many of the indigenous tribes or indigenous aboriginals to any land did not like mixing of the Europeans at all, including the Muskogee Creek, the Chickasaw, the original Aztecs, and the Mayans, until they were forced upon mating with the not the Mayans, but the Siberians and the Spaniards. All right. So that is one of the mighty warriors. Right. So here's another war, the Hawkesbury and the Nippian War of 1794 through 1816. That's 22 years. During that war, they took land and they came up with legal disputes until 1992. Then more wars. The Black War was between 1799 through 1805. During this time, you know that they're wiping them out. Even though they're fighting back, they're wiping them out so that there's no existence of the people. They can't propagate. You can't continue the traditions. You have no longer have warriors. You no longer have the talent or the degrees of tribal duties like war or hunting, fishing, storytelling, healing. You wipe out that, you don't have those people to pass on tradition. And then with forced indoctrination, there's no one there. So during that time, they took over those lands as well. The Tedbury's Wars, 1802 through 1810. That's 8 years. They took over more land. And of course, you already know these are the different clans that they wiped out. The death of Tedbury. He was a warrior as well, involved in frequent acts of resistance to British colonists in early years of New South Wales. He was the son of noted warrior and rebel Pemulwuy. So that is his son. He followed in his father's footsteps. So people that keep thinking people didn't fight or I'm not my ancestors, here it is. These people are fighting for their all dear life. Now, this is what the newspaper had to say about the first warrior's son, his son. The son appears to have inherited the ferocity and vices of his father. Upon the above occasion, he pointed his spear to the head and breast of Tunks and repeatedly threatened to plunge the weapon into him. But other persons, fortunately, appearing in sight, the assailants betook to the woods. Several other such attacks have been made, but as Tedbury's is stated to have always been of the party, which consisted but of two or three, it may be inferred that a spirit of malevolence is far from general. and under this belief, it may be hoped the settlers will not permit their servants or families to practice unnecessary severities which may irritate and provoke those who are at present peaceably disposed to join the atrocities of a few miscreants whom their own tribes, if not exasperated by ill treatment, would not doubt, as they have frequently done before, betray into our hands and avowedly assist in apprehending. So they're saying that keep your slaves or those you have in your possession from knowing about the warriors, even if they're related by tribe, blood, or just Australian in nature. If you allow them to hear about any of the uprisings, surely they will uprise as well. Let's see how he passed away. On February 19th, 1810, Ted Berry, in full view of witnesses, threw a spear at the sister of Edward Luttrell in the garden of her house at Parramatta. Edward shot him in the upper lip, and notwithstanding treatment the next day from the assistant surgeon at Hawkesbury, after at least some weeks he died of his wounds. Luttrell was charged with assault and acquitted on March 10th, 1810, Ted Berry being still alive at the time. Edward's brother, Robert Burgess Luttrell, was clubbed to death on November 7th, the next year in reprisal attack by Ted Berry's fellow Darrugs over his breaking of their spears and taking away of their women. And here you see that they take the women as well and do what they want with them. So it's disheartening. The next one was the Rum Rebellion, results of civil conflict for status quo. The Rum Rebellion was 1808 through 1810 for the status quo. And it involved in disbandment of certain things. Hawkesbury-Nepean War, 1814 through 1816. They took more land, and you see the nations involved, the indigenous nations. 1824, Bathurst War. Only one nation was involved. They took their land in that year. 1828 through 32, the Black War involved the Aboriginal Tasmanians. The British controlled, took over the people, the Tasmanians, took the land, and began to occupy and settle on the land. 1830 through 1850, the Port Phillip District Wars involved the Aboriginal Australians of this tribe here, took their land, occupied and settled as well. 1834 through 1849, or the 1860s, the Umarella Wars. They took the land and settled on it. Wiradjuri Wars, 1838 through 1841. This is getting to be disheartening. Took the land, occupied it. Mandandangi Land Warrior took the land. War of Southern Queensland took the land, occupied it. Port Augusta War took the land, occupied it. Flagstaff War. They rebelled and defeated. They approached ceasefire. The British claimed victory, negotiated peace with them. Hutt Valley was just the war. 1847, they negotiated a peace treaty. Eureka Rebellion, Miners Rebellion, Indian Mutiny, It was a revolt. This is disheartening. The wars keep going. They don't stop. As you can see, they keep going until they wipe them out and they took over the land. This is disheartening. It's disheartening. I want to show you of course, the actual survival.
That this program contains a minimum amount of water that someone needs in a humanitarian crisis.
For 25 years, foreign correspondent has brought the world.
That is not what I wanted.
It's the oldest surviving culture in the world, but ancient Aboriginal Australia remains a mystery to most. Uncovering that history has been Lynette Russell's life work.
No one person can ever know everything that we need to know about the past. My knowledge only goes back a few generations. What I need to really understand the deep past is I need that archaeological research.
Researchers may be putting the pieces together, and they're looking back thousands of years to do it. They've used data on the landscape, water sources and human physiology to predict how Australia's first people moved around the continent of Sahul, a period 60,000 years ago when the Australian mainland, Tasmania and Papua New Guinea formed one combined landmass.
So we have archaeologists and anthropologists and ecologists and geneticists and climatologists and geomorphologists, hydrologists, all working together to bring in different data sets.
The environment could have supported as many as 6.5 million people, and there are some striking similarities between ancient and recent history.
The superhighways that came out of some of the models actually seem to match up a lot of the old stock routes and the Aboriginal trade lines that we know from, say, the 19th century.
For researchers, the next step is to reach out into communities and see how their data meets the stories of Aboriginal dreaming.
Following ancient paths to make new discoveries. Dana Morse, ABC News, Adelaide.
I met Janet in an art gallery that I wandered into in Darwin. Aboriginal art has been increasing in popularity and is really about to explode on the art scene.
And collecting seeds. I have people coming in and they ask me what's the story is about and what's the painting is about, and I tell them what the story is. And you can find a special place. My mum paints, and my two aunties and my uncle paints, and my grandmothers as well, and my brother Malcolm paints, and my sisters as well, and myself, and my daughter as well. My two aunties, they're the ones that taught me, and they gave me all the stories and designs, and they took me to my grandfather's and great-grandfather's site, and they told me, the story of this one. And because it's really important, and they're the ones that have the knowledge to pass on the stories and the dreamings. My father's dreaming is serpent snake, and I also paint fire and lightning and thunder, different animals as well too. They're the totems of my fathers and my aunties. And I also paint my grandfathers, my mom's dad. because I am the custodian for my mums and my grandfathers.
Of all the artists that we have, Janet is the most popular, and her paintings go all over the world, not only to Australians, but they go to Europe and America. With Aboriginal artists, their stories are handed down through initiation ceremonies or age grading ceremonies. They cannot just paint any stories. They can only paint the stories that they own. The Aboriginal people, once they have their money, they share it with the rest of their family.
Janet's mother's song tells the story of the painting, which is about the history of her clan. Every time the Aborigines express themselves, either through their art or through their language, I can sense all the richness and the strength of their culture, and the pride that the older members feel towards it.
I teach my daughters and nieces to paint too, because it's really important. They have to, learn about our culture. Yeah, it's important for our kids to learn both ways, our language and English as well too.
All right, that was a very interesting virtual tour of the pre and post colonial era of the Aboriginals, Australian Aboriginals. Right, that is the time period between the 1700s. I didn't expect to. It was so emotional behind seeing the numerous wars that the Australians went through so that their descendants that are alive today will be able to exist. It's disheartening that they had to go through the wars that they went through. All right, so I challenge you to, on your time, take the moments to explore on your own. Get subjects to learn more about the inhabitants, the quote-unquote minorities of the land masses around the world. And you'll find out they never were the minority. Today they are not still the minority. And it appears to be a panic every time the depopulation, the population appears to be too much. And it appears to be a goal of removing, so that there are no uprisings or there are no resistance It's ludicrous. But we were able to go through the timelines. We were able to see some Aborigines at work in the arts and their crafts, the mainlands, their agricultural systems, and their mere existence. So I am going to end this virtual tour of the pre and post-colonial Australia. And I wanted to say thank you for joining me.